The chill of the old stone seeped into your bones as you descended, each step echoing the weight of the building above. The Citadel Trust, an edifice of Sophia Reed ambition, now stood as a monument to discretion and impenetrable security. Its granite facade, etched with the passage of 2 centuries, gave way to an interior of hushed marble and polished brass. A deliberate anachronism in a city that constantly reinvented itself. You were here because something had managed to slip through its unbreachable walls, or rather, into them, and then simply ceased to be. The uniformed officer at the steel-reinforced door of the sub-basement vault level gave you a curt nod. "Detective Blake, they're waiting for you." They turned out to be Graham Finch, the bank's impeccably tailored security chief, and a visibly agitated Mr. Harrison, the trust's vice president. Both men looked as if their perfectly starched shirts had just been dragged through a hedge. The air in the vault corridor, thick with the scent of ozone and old money, hummed with an unspoken tension that was almost palpable. "Detective," Finch began, his voice tight. "Thank you for coming so quickly." He gestured down the corridor, a gleaming tunnel lined with hundreds of identical, formidable vault doors. "It's unprecedented." You didn't need him to tell you that. Missing persons were a daily occurrence in the city, a melancholy rhythm of life and loss. But a missing person from here? This wasn't a back alley or a crowded subway station. This was the Citadel Trust, a fortress designed to protect secrets more valuable than lives. "The individual?" you asked, your voice cutting through the hushed reverence of the place. "Elias Thorne," Harrison interjected, wringing his hands. "An extremely private client. Owns several businesses, considerable assets. Reclusive, but utterly reliable in his habits." You knew the type. Old money, old habits. The kind of person who could vanish for months on a yacht and no one would bat an eye, unless a scheduled appointment was missed. But Thorne hadn't missed a meeting at a tropical resort. He'd missed his exit from a bank vault. Finch led you to a specific door, number 317. It was indistinguishable from its neighbors, a slab of tempered steel, its locking mechanism a complex array of tumblers and bolts. "Mr. Thorne entered his vault yesterday at 2:17 p.m. Our logs confirm it. His biometric signature, his key all verified. And he never left." "Precisely," Finch confirmed, his jaw tight. "Our internal cameras show him entering the corridor, passing the final security checkpoint into this section, and then unlocking his vault. The cameras covering the exit points, including the main client egress, show no sign of him leaving the vault level, let alone the building." "No forced entry?" you asked, already knowing the answer. The door stood pristine, unmarred. "None whatsoever. We've had our technicians go over it. No tampering with the lock, no signs of a breach from the inside or out. The vault itself is sealed." You looked at the door, then down the endless corridor of silent steel. Hundreds of private worlds, each holding its own secrets, its own history. And one of them, number 317, had swallowed a man whole. "What about the vault itself?" "We haven't opened it," Harrison stammered. "Client privacy is paramount, even in this situation. We can only open it with a court order, or if Mr. Thorne authorizes it." "Mr. Thorne is missing," you stated flatly. "Client privacy may take a backseat to a potential homicide, Mr. Harrison." You felt a familiar prickle of irritation at the institutional stubbornness, a wall you often faced in cases involving the city's elite. You took a moment to absorb the scene. The meticulous order, the absolute lack of any disturbance. No alarm bells, no struggling, no sign of violence. Elias Thorne, a man of routine, had simply walked into his vault yesterday afternoon and, according to every piece of evidence, had never walked out. It was a vanishing act that defied every logical explanation, every law of physics. "Show me the security footage," you instructed Finch. "Every angle from the moment he entered the building." As Finch led you back towards the security office, the weight of the impossible settled upon you. A man doesn't just evaporate from a high-security bank vault. Not without a trace. This wasn't a simple missing person. That pulling it would unravel something far larger and far more dangerous than anyone in this pristine, secure world could imagine. The hum of the ventilation system was the only sound accompanying Finch's heavy tread as he led you deeper into the labyrinthine sub-basement. The ornate, polished marble of the main bank gave way to rough-hewn stone walls, damp in places, and the air grew thick with the scent of old concrete and something metallic, almost coppery. The security office wasn't a sleek, modern command center, but a fortified bunker tucked away behind a series of blast doors, a relic of a bygone era, repurposed. There are cameras everywhere, motion sensors, biometric scanners. This isn't a magic trick, Finch. Finch grunted, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Tell that to the empty room, Blake. Thorne's suite was sealed from the inside. No forced entry, no alarms tripped, just gone. His voice was tight, betraying a crack in his usual professional veneer. The impossible weight you felt was clearly pressing on him too. As you rounded a corner, a flicker of light caught your eye. Not the steady glow of the emergency lights, but a frantic, strobing blue and red. It pulsed from further down a disused service tunnel, one you hadn't noticed on your initial sweep. Finch stopped dead, his hand going to the comms unit on his shoulder. "What the hell?" he muttered, already speaking into it. "Control, this is Finch. Report on the southwest service tunnel. I'm seeing activity." A crackle of static, then a panicked voice, breathless and urgent. "Finch, get down here now. We've got a situation. Code red. It's bad." The color drained from Finch's face. He didn't wait for your confirmation, breaking into a jog. You followed, your heart hammering against your ribs. The blue and red lights intensified, painting the damp walls with their frantic dance. The tunnel opened into a cavernous space, a forgotten relic of the building's original construction. It was an underground loading bay, or perhaps a canal dock, long since sealed off from the outside world, but still connected to a vast. The water lapped gently against a crumbling concrete platform, reflecting the emergency lights like shattered jewels. As you drew closer, the source of their distress became sickeningly clear. A man lay sprawled on the concrete, half in, half out of the murky water. His head was turned at an unnatural angle, his eyes wide and vacant, staring up at the forgotten ceiling. It wasn't Thorne, but you recognized him instantly. Arthur Pendleton. Thorne's executive assistant, a man known for his meticulous nature and unshakable loyalty. He was the one who managed Thorne's calendar, his appointments, his every minute detail. He was also the last person, other than Finch, to have seen Thorne alive. At least, according to the security logs you'd reviewed. Pendleton had been scheduled to meet Thorne in the vault suite just before Thorne's disappearance. A gasp escaped your lips, raw and involuntary. This wasn't a disappearance. This was something far, far worse. The security officers parted, allowing Finch and you to approach. One of them, a young woman with wide, terrified eyes, pointed a trembling finger at the water. There's a briefcase, sir, floating nearby. It's got the Thorne Corp. Logo. You knelt beside Pendleton, careful not to disturb anything. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent in the stark light. His pockets were turned inside out, his wrist bare where an expensive watch should have been. This wasn't an accident. This was a robbery. Or, more likely, a message. "Don't touch anything," you commanded, your voice sharper than you intended. "Secure the area. No one in, no one out. Call the detective immediately." Finch was already on his comms, his voice low and urgent. "We need forensics, a full team, and the detective, now." You stared at Pendleton's lifeless face, the meticulous assistant, the last link to Thorne's presence. His death screamed foul play, a violent punctuation mark on Thorne's impossible vanishing act. This wasn't a case of a high-powered CEO simply walking away from his life. This was a deliberate, brutal act. The location itself was telling. This forgotten, watery grave, tucked away beneath the very institution Thorne had vanished from. It suggested intimate knowledge of the building's hidden recesses, a calculated choice of disposal. Someone knew this place existed, knew it offered a way to make a body disappear, or at least to hide it for a time. It was a breadcrumb, deliberately left, a clear connection to Thorne's company. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was targeted. This was a statement. The stakes had just skyrocketed. The search for a missing CEO had just become a murder investigation, laced with the unsettling certainty of a cover-up. And you, Blake, were standing right in the middle of it. The impossible had just become terrifyingly, brutally real. The weight of it settled on you, heavier than any vault door. You were no longer looking for a man who had vanished. You were looking for a killer. And a killer who was clearly willing to leave a trail of bodies in their wake. The air in the private bank vault was a stale, metallic breath, heavy with the scent of aged paper and forgotten wealth. Here, beneath the polished marble floors of a historic building, you had hoped to find answers. You sat hunched over a heavy oak table, the beam of your tactical flashlight cutting through the gloom, illuminating stacks of ledgers, financial statements, and encrypted drives. The CEO's records, meticulously organized yet deliberately opaque, spilled across the surface. Hours bled into days within that subterranean chamber. The only sound, the rustle of paper, the click of your mouse, and the frantic beat of your own heart. Your fingers ached from turning pages. Your eyes burned from deciphering endless rows of figures. What you unearthed wasn't a single glaring anomaly, but a pervasive systemic rot. Phantom subsidiaries, registered in distant tax havens, appeared and vanished from the CEO's company accounts with a startling frequency. Large, untraceable capital injections flowed in, only to be siphoned out through a labyrinth of shell corporations. Loans that never seemed to be repaid were simply rolled over, their origins and destinations obscured by layers of bureaucratic obfuscation. The CEO's personal finances, a typically chaotic affair, showed a sudden, inexplicable surge in wealth just months before his disappearance, followed by an equally abrupt, dramatic plunge. It wasn't just messy bookkeeping. It was an intricate, deliberate deception. The deeper you dug, the clearer the pattern became. The common thread in these financial machinations wasn't the CEO himself, but a recurring series of discrete investors. Not individuals, but holding companies, each a faceless entity registered in a different offshore jurisdiction. These entities consistently poured vast sums into the CEO's ventures, their involvement disproportionate to any visible return. They were a network, operating in unison, their anonymity a shield. You couldn't put a name to them, but you could feel their collective weight, their influence. They weren't just passive investors. They were puppeteers, their strings woven deep into the fabric of the CEO's empire. You were halfway through cross-referencing a particularly convoluted series of transactions, tracing a multi-million-dollar transfer through 3 different countries when your secure government-issued phone buzzed. It wasn't a call from your direct superior, nor from the precinct. It was an email, crisp and formal, from a deputy chief you rarely interacted with, a man whose reputation for political savvy far outstripped his field experience. The subject line, Case Review, CEO Investigation, was innocuous enough. It was a polite but firm directive to streamline your investigation, to focus on verifiable leads, and avoid speculative tangents. It cited concerns raised by influential stakeholders regarding the scope and direction of your current inquiry. You stared at the screen, the words burning into your vision. Influential stakeholders. The phrase hung in the air, a euphemism for the powerful, discreet investors you had just uncovered. They weren't just hidden, they were watching. They had influence that reached far beyond the CEO's company, deep into the very heart of the system you represented. The realization hit you with the force of a physical blow. You weren't just investigating a murder. You were disturbing a carefully constructed ecosystem of power, a web whose threads stretched further and higher than you could have imagined. The official resistance wasn't just a bureaucratic hurdle. It was a warning, a glimpse of the pervasive influence of unseen forces. You were no longer just digging for truth. You were digging against a current. You were alone, and you were a target. The air in the vault, once merely dusty, now felt heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. Your flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating shelves stacked with a century of forgotten lives. You methodically worked through the boxes, the musty scent of aged paper filling your lungs. Most of the contents were personal effects, ornate jewelry boxes, bundles of faded letters tied with brittle ribbon, a collection of antique pocket watches. But you weren't looking for heirlooms. Then, in a deep, unmarked wooden chest, you found it. Not a single glaring piece of evidence, but a collection of documents that, when pieced together, began to tell a different story. There were ledgers, meticulously kept, dating back to the late 1940s. They detailed investments, land acquisitions, and discrete financial transfers to a number of shell corporations. One name recurred with unsettling frequency: a powerful, politically connected family, long established in the city's highest echelons, known for their philanthropic endeavors and their iron grip on local policy. Let's call them the influential family. These documents showed the influential family wasn't just a patron. They were a significant early investor in a precursor company, a small, obscure electronics firm that, according to these records, specialized in secure communications and data storage. The firm had been founded by the same visionary, albeit eccentric figure who later established the colossal tech company you were now scrutinizing. The connection was undeniable, yet it had been meticulously scrubbed from public record. The official narrative always painted the tech giant as a self-made titan, rising from a garage startup. These papers told of a carefully cultivated foundation, built on the old money and political leverage of the influential family. You found an old stock certificate, its border decorated with an elaborate, almost Masonic crest, clearly indicating a substantial ownership stake held by a trust fund directly linked to the influential family. Another document was a memorandum of understanding, outlining a strategic partnership where the family would facilitate necessary regulatory approvals and secure prime real estate in exchange for a significant, undisclosed percentage of future profits. The language was veiled, but its intent was clear. Political influence for corporate gain. The tech company hadn't simply acquired this older firm. It had grown from it, nurtured by the influential family's unseen hand. The vault hadn't just held the past. It held the true origins of the present. This wasn't just about a hidden vault. It was about a hidden lineage, a secret parentage for a company that projected an image of independent innovation. You photographed every relevant page, every ledger entry, every memorandum. The weight of this information settled heavily on your shoulders. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was a generational conspiracy, deeply embedded in the city's power structures. Emerging from the vault, the world above felt jarringly bright and loud. You felt a profound sense of isolation, burdened by knowledge that could shatter reputations and careers. The cafe, where you retreated to process your findings over a lukewarm coffee, felt like a neutral ground, a place to blend in. Blake, isn't it? You looked up, startled. A woman stood there, her eyes sharp, her posture alert. She carried a well-worn leather satchel and a reporter's notebook was clutched in her hand. Her hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, and her expression was one of shrewd curiosity. "Can I help you?" you asked, your voice deliberately flat, guarding your thoughts. She offered a tight, knowing smile. "Maybe. Or maybe I can help you. You've been asking a lot of questions about the tech company lately. And I've been asking some of my own. How could she know? You tried to maintain an impassive face, but a flicker of surprise must have crossed your features. "Don't worry," she said, pulling out a chair and sitting down uninvited. "I'm not with them. I'm with the truth. My sources tell me you're looking into some irregularities, some inconvenient history regarding the tech company's origins. And you've piqued my interest. I've always felt there was something off about their meteoric rise, too clean, too perfect. I've been tracking some unusual land deals, old properties quietly acquired by shell companies, all leading back to a powerful political family with deep ties to this city. I just couldn't find the direct link to the tech giant. Until now, maybe." She gestured vaguely towards your phone, where the images of the old documents were still visible. "That's why you were in the vault, wasn't it? To find the unseen hand guiding the puppet strings. You studied her, weighing the risk. Her eyes held an intensity that matched your own current obsession. She wasn't just speculating. She was connecting threads you hadn't even started to weave. An unexpected ally, yes, but perhaps a necessary one. The story was clearly too big for one person to handle. What do you know about the influential family's historical involvement with, say, secure communications technology?" you finally asked, testing the waters. A genuine smile touched her lips. "More than the public knows, Blake. Much more. And I have a feeling, after seeing your face and what you're looking at, that we're both about to uncover something that could shake this city to its core." The air in the bustling cafe suddenly felt charged, no longer heavy with silent secrets, but with the electric hum of shared purpose. The air in the bustling cafe suddenly felt charged, no longer heavy with silent secrets, but with the electric hum of shared purpose. The journalist, whose name you still didn't quite know but whose resolve was now undeniable, pushed a faded photograph across the table. It was an old bank statement, smudged but legible, depicting a transfer of an exorbitant sum to an account linked to a defunct shell corporation. Scrawled on the back, almost an afterthought, was an address. The nondescript facade of a historic building downtown, home to a private vault service. "This is where the money went," the journalist said, their voice low. "And who it was laundered through. My source was too afraid to go further, but they slipped me this. Said it was the key." You arrived at the building an hour later. Its stone exterior weathered by a century of city life, a stark contrast to the gleaming glass tower surrounding it. The heavy oak doors creaked open onto a hushed marble lobby, where an elderly attendant, spectacles perched on his nose, regarded you with an unnerving stillness. It looked like something out of a forgotten era, a fortress against time itself. The attendant, after a brief, almost silent transaction with the journalist, pointed to a specific box, number 417. Your heart hammered a rhythm against your ribs as you watched the journalist retrieve a small, plain metal box. Inside, there was no hidden treasure, no sparkling jewels. Instead, you found a meticulously kept ledger, bound in worn leather, and a stack of crisp, official-looking documents. The ledger detailed a complex web of transactions, shell companies, and political donations, all leading back to a single prominent name: Councilman Davies. He wasn't just implicated. He was the architect. As you studied the evidence, the weight of the city seemed to press down on you. This wasn't just a crime. It was a corruption so deeply embedded it threatened to unravel the very fabric of local governance. This was a man with power, influence, and a lot to lose. The first threat arrived subtly. A few hours after you'd left the vault, the ledger now secured in your possession. Your phone buzzed with an unknown number. You answered. A clipped, anonymous voice spoke, devoid of inflection. "Some investigations are best left alone, Blake, for your own good and your future." The line went dead before you could respond. You dismissed it, a standard intimidation tactic. But then the calls started coming from your department, not from your direct superior, but from higher up, from offices you rarely interacted with. The message was always the same, couched in professional concern. Blake, we're hearing some unsettling rumors about your methods. Are you sure you're following proper procedure? This Councilman Davies is a respected public servant. We wouldn't want to see you pursuing unsubstantiated claims and damaging your career. The veiled warnings escalated. A meeting was called, not with your team, but with the head of internal affairs, a man known for his ruthless efficiency. He sat across from you, his gaze unblinking. Blake, we've received an anonymous complaint about your conduct. Allegations of overstepping your authority, harassment, even fabricating evidence. We know it's probably nonsense, but these things need to be investigated. Perhaps a temporary reassignment is in order until this blows over? It was a clear attempt to sideline you, to remove you from the investigation, to make you disappear into bureaucratic purgatory. Your career, the very path you had dedicated your life to, was now in their crosshairs. You felt the icy grip of panic, but beneath it, a burning anger. They weren't just trying to stop the case. They were trying to stop you. You recounted the events to the journalist over a secure line later that evening. They're scared, the journalist finally said, their voice hard. They wouldn't be pulling these stunts if you weren't onto something big. This isn't just about Davies anymore, is it? It's about protecting the whole rotten structure. They're trying to bury me, you admitted, the words tasting bitter. They want me off the case, discredited. Then we fight back, the journalist declared, their tone unwavering. This isn't just your fight, Blake. This is my fight, too. My publication has resources, a platform. That's a different battle. You've got the ledger, the proof. I've got the means to expose it. We're in this together. The weight of the personal threats remained, a constant pressure, but the journalist's unwavering resolve ignited a spark within you. You were no longer alone. The crosshairs might be fixed on you, but now you had an ally standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to face the storm. The game had changed. It was personal now, and you wouldn't back down. The heavy vault door clanged shut behind you, a sound of definitive finality that echoed in the cavernous space. The air was still, cool with the scent of old paper and metal, a stark contrast to the digital storm you were about to unleash. The journalist, already setting up a specialized offline laptop on a long, polished table, gestured to the 2 hard drives they'd brought. No network connection, no backdoors. You nodded, the weight of the threats against you still a dull ache, but now sharpened by a new, urgent focus. This wasn't just about protecting yourself. It was about exposing a truth that could shatter the foundations of trust. The journalist connected the first drive, a small, unassuming black rectangle that held an unimaginable volume of secrets. The screen glowed, illuminating their grim, determined face. This is an anonymized dump from a former employee's personal archives, the journalist explained, their fingers flying across the keyboard, navigating through layers of encrypted files. They were a low-level programmer, but they had access to the staging servers before the project went live. Luckily, they had a contingency plan if anything happened to them. The first files were innocuous enough: project manifests, code snippets, internal memos about user experience enhancement, and predictive analytics for market trends. But as the journalist dug deeper, bypassing what looked like intentionally misleading file names, the language shifted. This wasn't about selling products. Then came the data streams themselves. Not just demographics, but personality traits, psychological vulnerabilities, political leanings, even predicted reactions to specific news events. The program, codenamed Ether, wasn't just collecting data. It was interpreting. Building comprehensive digital models of individuals, predicting their choices before they even made them. It's a ghost in the machine, the journalist murmured, their eyes wide with a mixture of horror and grim confirmation. Ether isn't just monitoring, it's learning. It's creating predictive pathways for everyone. You leaned closer, your breath catching in your throat as the journalist opened a series of subfolders. These weren't about market research. These were about influence. You saw examples of targeted news feeds subtly altered to shift public opinion on a particular issue, or even to discredit specific individuals. Small, almost imperceptible changes in algorithmically delivered content that, over time, could reshape an entire narrative. The true invasiveness of Ether became terrifyingly clear. It wasn't just monitoring social media or search history. It was a deep network penetration system, capable of accessing secure communications, activating device microphones and cameras without user knowledge, and tracking movements with an unnerving precision. You saw logs detailing how the system could identify potential whistleblowers or critics, flag them as anomalies, and then initiate a series of subtle digital interventions designed to undermine their credibility, isolate them, or even trigger a self-destructive spiral. This is about control. Complete, pervasive control over information, over perception, over the very fabric of society. The tech company isn't just selling data, they're selling influence. They're building a system that can preemptively manage dissent, shape political landscapes, and even engineer social outcomes. They're creating a reality based on their own agenda, or the agenda of whoever is pulling their strings. Your mind reeled. The threats against you, the pressure to back down. It wasn't just about a stolen algorithm or a corporate secret. It was about protecting a system designed to invisibly manipulate millions, perhaps billions of lives. The tech company, once seen as an innovator, was a puppet master, pulling digital strings on an unprecedented scale. The journalist scrolled to another folder marked Project Chimera. This was the horrifying culmination. Here lay the profiles of key individuals, politicians, activists, rival CEOs, and even prominent journalists. You saw the names of people you recognized, people who had recently experienced inexplicable professional setbacks or sudden shifts in public opinion. The ghost in the machine wasn't just an observer. It was an actor, an invisible force subtly nudging the world towards a predetermined future. And you, Blake, had stumbled into its path. The weight of the world seemed to settle on your shoulders, but with it came a burning clarity. The personal threats were still real, but they paled in comparison to the scope of what you had just uncovered. And you were now on the front lines, with the journalist beside you, ready to fight a ghost. You sat hunched over a console, fingers flying across a holographic keyboard, the glow of multiple screens painting your face in shifting hues of green and blue. The ghost in the machine. That's what you'd started calling the omnipresent surveillance system. Wasn't just an observer. It was an actor. An invisible force subtly nudging the world towards a predetermined future. You'd spent the last several hours sifting through layers of encrypted data, following the digital breadcrumbs left by the vanished man, tracing the network's tendrils back through shell corporations and proxy servers. It was orchestrated, precise. The system had been designed to make people vanish without a trace, to erase their digital footprints, and presumably, their physical presence too. Why would a cutting-edge surveillance program need legacy data from decades past? Curiosity, a dangerous ally, compelled you to click. The screen filled with a cascade of older files, text documents, grainy photographs, and scanned newspaper clippings, all dated from a period long before the current digital age. Names, places, and events began to surface, pulling at a thread you thought had been severed decades ago. Then you saw it. A name, emblazoned across a faded headline. Senator Thorne's aide vanishes Arthur Emma scandal. Your breath hitched. The vault, with its thick concrete and steel, suddenly felt stifling, the air too thin. Senator Thorne. The name was a phantom limb, an old ache that had never truly healed. A lingering question mark etched into your soul. You remembered it vividly. Fresh out of the academy, brimming with idealism, you'd been assigned to the task force investigating the disappearance of Marcus Vance, Senator Thorne's chief of staff. Vance had been on the verge of exposing a massive kickback scheme involving state contracts and powerful political figures. He'd vanished overnight, leaving behind a meticulously organized office and a wife who swore he wouldn't abandon his family. The official narrative had been a sudden, unexplained departure, a man buckling under pressure. But you'd known better. You remembered the sudden, inexplicable stonewalling from state agencies, the anonymous tips that led nowhere, the way key witnesses suddenly recanted their statements. The case had been shut down with a swiftness that bordered on violence, leaving you with a bitter taste and a gnawing sense of injustice. You'd tried to keep the file open, to dig deeper, but your superiors, citing lack of resources and political sensitivities, had ordered you to drop it. It was your first real lesson in how the world truly worked, how some truths were simply too dangerous to unearth. Vance hadn't just vanished. He had been erased. The legacy data contained encrypted communiques detailing the exact methods used to orchestrate his disappearance, the manipulation of financial records, the planting of false alibis, the precise timing of digital blackouts that ensured no trace remained. It was a crude, nascent version of the very system you were now investigating, a blueprint for the ghost in the machine. The current disappearance, the one that had led you down this rabbit hole, wasn't an isolated incident. It was a continuation, a perfected iteration of a decades-old strategy. The current target, much like Marcus Vance, had been on the verge of exposing inconvenient truths that threatened the same entrenched political and financial powers. The surveillance program, Project Chimera, wasn't just a tool for future control. It was a mechanism to retroactively erase the past, to ensure that the skeletons in the powerful's closets remained buried. This wasn't just about a missing person. It was about a generational conspiracy, a cabal that had perfected the art of making people disappear, rewriting history to suit their narrative. Senator Thorne, the political scandal, the vanished aide. It wasn't a closed chapter. It was the prologue. The same players, or their well-trained successors, were still pulling the strings, using the very technology you were now investigating to enforce their will. Your earlier frustration morphed into a burning resolve. You weren't just a detective anymore. You were an archaeologist of truth, digging through the layers of deceit to unearth a long-buried scandal that had festered and grown into the current threat. The current disappearance was merely the most recent symptom of a much older disease. You looked at the glowing screens, the faces of the vanished, the names of the powerful. The vault, once a sanctuary for your investigation, now felt like a battleground, a place where the past had reached out to claim the present. The ghost in the machine wasn't just watching, it was waiting. The faces of the vanished, the names of the powerful. They swirled before you, a constellation of victims and perpetrators that was finally, horrifyingly, beginning to resolve into a distinct pattern. The tech company, Viridian Dynamics, a name that had surfaced repeatedly in your earlier inquiries, now pulsed at the nexus of every compromised figure. They weren't just building smart city infrastructure. They were building smart control. A city council vote on a controversial zoning change, passed by a narrow margin. Two of the council members who had switched their votes at the last minute. Their names were among those whose digital lives had been meticulously cataloged by Viridian. Another instance, a lucrative city contract awarded to a fledgling construction firm, despite more experienced bids. The CEO of that firm? His face, too, had been flagged in Viridian's data. The system wasn't about theft or simple espionage. It was about leverage. Viridian Dynamics, cloaked in the innocuous guise of urban innovation, had been systematically mapping the digital footprints of every influential person in the city. Not just their public profiles, but their private communications, their financial indiscretions, their hidden vices, their deepest fears. Every misstep, every secret, meticulously filed away. A series of encrypted communications, initially dismissed as high-level corporate jargon, began to decode themselves in your mind as you filtered them through the lens of political influence. They weren't just internal Viridian memos. They were directives, orders, and the sender, though never explicitly named, was consistently referred to by a specific, almost reverent code name: the Architect. You pulled up the public records of Viridian Dynamics' initial funding. Robert Thorne, the venerable city councilman, the man who had championed Viridian Dynamics' Smart City initiative from its inception, the man who had pushed for the very ordinances that allowed Viridian unparalleled access to the city's digital infrastructure. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. Thorne wasn't just a beneficiary. He was the orchestrator. He hadn't just endorsed the tech company. He had built it, funded it, and weaponized it. Viridian Dynamics wasn't a company. It was his personal panopticon. A vast, intricate network designed not to improve the city, but to control it. You imagined him in his pristine office, a portrait of civic duty, while below the surface, his digital tendrils snaked through the city's every artery. He wasn't interested in money alone, not in the vulgar sense. His ambition was far grander, far more insidious: absolute control. He wanted to be the puppet master, pulling the strings of every major decision, every career, every life that mattered. Their digital ghosts on your screens were not just a record of their existence, but a testament to Thorne's ruthlessness. He didn't just blackmail, he eliminated. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking. This wasn't a simple criminal enterprise. It was a systemic takeover. Thorne had identified the vulnerabilities of a modern, digitally dependent city and exploited them with surgical precision. He wasn't just a corrupt politician. He was an architect of power, building an empire of fear and compliance. The vault, once a space of quiet contemplation, now throbbed with the silent hum of the servers, each one a repository of Thorne's insidious dominion. And he was not just manipulating the city, he was becoming the city, his will shaping its very future. Your hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. The weight of this revelation was crushing, yet it also brought a surge of clarity. The scattered threads of your investigation had converged into a single terrifying truth. You had found your monster. It was no longer about finding out what happened. It was about stopping the architect of control before his edifice of manipulation became utterly unassailable. The vault, once a place of safety, now felt like a launching pad for a war you hadn't known you were fighting. Now you had to use it. The screens continued to glow, reflecting the grim determination in your eyes. The grim data scrolling across the multiple monitors confirmed your worst fears. The mastermind, unnerved by your relentless pursuit, had initiated a purge. They're moving fast, your contact, a woman whose face was etched with a similar resolve, stated, her voice tight. She pointed to a series of alerts flashing red. 2 more targets confirmed neutralized in the last 15 minutes. Former associates, low level. The historic building above, with its thick stone walls and ornate facade, offered little comfort against the digital storm raging outside. You watched as the digital map of the city lit up with new, ominous markers. The mastermind wasn't just tying up loose ends. They were severing entire branches of their network, a scorched earth policy designed to eliminate any trace of their involvement. And you, Blake, were undoubtedly at the top of their hit list. Our window is closing, you said, the words feeling heavy on your tongue. The air in the vault, usually cool and still, now felt charged with a frantic energy. Each of them knew the stakes. They were exposed just by being associated with you. The purge wasn't random. It was a calculated sweep, meticulously executed. And that brought you back to one name: Eleanor Vance, the missing CEO. Eleanor, you murmured, tapping her last known digital footprint on the central display. Her image, pulled from an old corporate profile, stared back at you, poised, intelligent, and now critically endangered. She's the linchpin, the full financial records, the coded communications, the physical ledger we've been tracking. If she talks, it's over for them. Your contact nodded grimly. Which means she's priority number 1 for their cleanup crew. She's not just missing Blake. She's being hunted, along with whatever she knows. The game had indeed changed. It wasn't about piecing together a puzzle anymore. It was a desperate race against a ticking clock. Every second spent in the relative safety of the vault was a second Eleanor Vance might not have. Where would she go? You pressed, scanning the data for any anomaly, any deviation from her known patterns. She's smart. She wouldn't just vanish without a trace. She had contingency plans. Your tech expert chimed in, his fingers flying across a keyboard. We've been sifting through her encrypted cloud storage. She left a breadcrumb trail, but it's heavily obscured, designed to be found only if she didn't check in after a certain period. That period is now, you stated, the urgency in your voice rising. They're actively hunting her. We need to find that trail, and we need to find it before they do. The vault hummed with the silent tension of a bomb about to detonate. The cool, sterile environment felt suffocating. You needed to move. You needed to act. The data points on the screen, once abstract clues, were now vital lifelines. There's something here, the tech expert suddenly announced, his voice sharp with discovery. A new cluster of data points materialized on the screen, faint but distinct, pointing towards an old, abandoned industrial district on the city's outskirts. A server ping, extremely weak, intermittent. It looks like a last-ditch, automated data burst. A dead man's switch, maybe. That's it, you declared, a surge of adrenaline coursing through you. She activated it. She's alive, and she's trying to reach out. But if we found it, they could too. You grabbed your jacket, the weight of the task settling heavily on your shoulders. The vault, with its layers of security, had served its purpose for the investigation. Now it was time to step out into the very real danger that awaited. Get me a car ready, fast, you commanded, your eyes fixed on the flickering coordinates. And prep the comms. We go in hard, we go in silent. We have one shot at this, before the mastermind erases her and everything she knows from existence. The race against time had officially begun. The heavy steel door of the vault groaned shut behind you, sealing the world outside. The air in the private bank vault, deep beneath the historic building, was thick with the scent of old money and an unspoken tension. Your footsteps echoed on the polished marble floor, each stride carrying the weight of everything you'd fought for. The race against time had led you here, to this gilded cage, and failure was no longer an option. In the center of the vast circular room, illuminated by the soft glow of concealed lights, stood the man you had pursued across the city. Your adversary, calm and poised, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, watched your approach. Beside him, 2 hulking figures, his enforcers, stood like statues, their gazes unwavering. But you weren't alone. This was your public showdown, a confrontation staged in the heart of your enemy's domain. Blake, your adversary said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. You're a persistent nuisance. I admire that in a way. But you've walked into a trap. This vault is impenetrable. No one needs to hear me scream, you replied, your voice steady. She adjusted her lens, the tiny red light on her camera glowing. Truth? He scoffed, a dismissive wave of his hand. Truth is a malleable concept, Blake, especially when shaped by the right resources. He gestured around the vault, at the rows of safe deposit boxes, at the stacks of documents visible through the reinforced glass of a private office. This is where fortunes are made, where influence is cultivated, where the world is managed. You held up the data chip. This is where your world ends. This isn't just a collection of encrypted communications, financial ledgers, and shell company transfers. This is a map of your entire network. Amateur theatrics. A fabricated chip, no doubt. Anyone can create such a thing. Perhaps you conceded, stepping closer? But not anyone can get a signed confession from your chief of security, detailing how he executed your orders. Not anyone can retrieve bank statements from your offshore accounts, cross-referenced with your legitimate business transactions, showing the exact moments your shell companies funneled money to public officials. You paused, letting the weight of your words settle. And certainly, not anyone can tie the missing funds from the city's infrastructure projects directly to your personal investments, showing a clear pattern of embezzlement that directly led to the collapse of those projects and the suffering of thousands. The color drained from his face. He glanced at his enforcers, a silent command passing between them. They shifted, ready to move, but you held up a hand, not to them, but to him. "Don't bother," you said, your voice cutting through the rising tension. The detective is already en route, and by the time they get here, the journalist will have finished her broadcast. Every single detail on this chip, every single piece of evidence will be out there. Live. But you were quicker. You anticipated his move, stepping in front of him, blocking his path. "It's over," you stated, holding the chip aloft for the camera. He was a cornered animal, his carefully constructed facade shattering into a million pieces. He roared, not in anger, but in the agony of defeat. His enforcers, caught between their loyalty and the sudden, undeniable reality of their master's collapse, hesitated, looking from him to you, then to the silent, unblinking eye of the camera. The journalist, her face grim but resolute, continued to film, her presence a silent promise that this unmasking would not be contained. The broadcast had begun. Your adversary's reign was over. The lens of the journalist's camera, a cyclopean eye, bore witness to the unraveling. Its crimson recording light pulsed, a steady heartbeat against the frantic rhythm of the vault. You watched the faces of the conspirators contort, their carefully constructed masks shattering under the unforgiving glare of the broadcast. The journalist, her voice a steel thread, continued her narration, detailing the intricate web of corruption, the names, the dates, the sheer audacity of their betrayal. You felt a strange detachment, as if watching a play unfold. The climax finally reached. The suffocating weight that had pressed down on you for weeks began to lift, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Then came the sounds from above. Distant sirens, growing rapidly louder, their wail a triumphant chorus. The heavy vault door, once an impenetrable barrier, now felt like a prelude to liberation. Footsteps pounded on the stairs, a cacophony of authority closing in. When the first uniformed officers burst through, weapons drawn, the conspirators offered no resistance. Their fight drained, their power evaporated. You were identified, not as a suspect, but as the one who had brought the light. The journalist, her camera finally lowered, gave you a nod of profound respect, a silent promise kept. As you were led out, past the handcuffed figures of men who once believed themselves untouchable, you felt the cool, stale air of the vault give way to the rush of the city night. The historic building's entrance was a maelstrom of flashing lights and shouting voices. A throng of reporters, their microphones thrust forward like hungry snakes, surged against a police cordon. Amidst the chaos, you spotted the detective, his face grim but his eyes holding a glimmer of satisfaction. He cut through the crowd, reaching you, offering a hand that was firm and reassuring. "Blake," he said, his voice low. "It's over." You could only nod, the word over echoing in the vast emptiness inside you. The broadcast had ignited a firestorm. News channels across the nation were ablaze with the story, replaying the journalist's grim exposé, dissecting every detail. The following days were a blur of debriefings, statements, and the slow, arduous process of dismantling a deeply entrenched network. Arrests swept through the city's elite like a cleansing tide. High-profile resignations followed, one after another, as the foundations of power shuddered and shifted. The public's trust, so long eroded, began the painful journey of rebuilding, brick by painstaking brick. For you, the immediate aftermath was a strange blend of relief and emptiness. The relentless pursuit of truth had consumed every waking moment, every thought. The grand buildings, once symbols of an immutable order, now seemed to carry the faint, lingering scent of corruption, a stark reminder of what had festered beneath their polished facades. The city, too, bore the scars of the revelation. There was a palpable shift in the air, a newfound vigilance in the eyes of its citizens. Protests, once a rarity, became a common sight, a testament to a public no longer willing to accept the status quo. The echoes of your fight resonated in every corner, in every hushed conversation about accountability, in every demand for transparency. Your own journey had left an indelible mark. In his place was a man tempered by fire, forever changed by the burden of knowledge and the weight of his actions. You had sacrificed much. Peace of mind, anonymity, a semblance of normalcy. But you had also gained something invaluable. The fierce, unyielding satisfaction of having stood for truth, even when it meant standing alone. The fight for justice was not a single battle won, but a continuous war. But as you looked out over the city skyline, bathed in the dawn's first light, you saw not just the remnants of what was, but the fragile, hopeful beginnings of what could be. The echoes of your actions would ripple through its history, a silent, persistent promise that some truths, once revealed, could never again be buried.